Lesson 29, Vowel Pairs. In ancient Greek, when it comes to making an O sound, we have two letters that handle that sound. One of them is called omega, and one is called omicron. The letter omicron is always going to be short in duration. The letter omega is always going to be long in duration. But they make the same sound quality. They both have the same sound. The only difference is how long they last.
And that length difference is actually reflected in their names as well. Mega in Greek means long. One of its meanings is long. And so it's literally O, long O. Omicron, on the other hand, means short O. Omikron, because mikron in Greek can mean short.
So if you think about the names of these letters, that will help you remember which one is the short one and which one is the long one. So omicron and omega work together as a pair. They work together to handle all the O sounds in Greek. Omicron handles all the short sounds. Omega handles all the long sounds. So they kind of work as a team, wouldn't you say, Catherine?
Yes, they've divided and conquered the letter O sound.
Instead of the A team, they're the O team, I guess. So, Catherine, in this lesson, we're teaching our readers and listeners to pronounce both of these letters with the same quality of sound. But I think we should mention the fact that not everyone is going to pronounce these letters the same way. We're pronouncing them the way that we think is best and the way that we think is most helpful for students. But different kinds of Greek teachers in different disciplines and different kinds of Greek, they may pronounce some of these letters differently than we do. And I think the letter omicron is one of those.
Yes, because for certain teachers in certain disciplines, you're going to find that instead of saying O for omicron, some people say ah for omicron. So the word logos, how we would pronounce it, it has two omicrons, but it would be pronounced as logos.
By the way, that word is spelled lambda, omicron, gamma, omicron, sigma.
Mm-hmm.
So we would say logos, but a lot of people will say lagos, like that.
It's not quite that pronounced, but yes, it is that kind of sound.
So a lot of our listeners and readers, if they continue forward in Greek, they're going to hear that kind of thing, especially if they go into Greek New Testament studies. A lot of people in the field of Greek New Testament studies pronounce the omicron that way.
Yeah.
So let's talk about why they should or should not do that.
I would advocate not pronouncing omicron as ah, but instead pronouncing it as o, mostly for the sake of clarity down the road, because there's a pronoun, the relative pronoun. So what we would translate as who or which or that. There's one form of that pronoun that is an omicron with a rough breathing, and there's another form that's an alpha with a rough breathing. And if you're pronouncing omicron like ah, it's going to sound the same because ha omicron and ha alpha sound exactly the same. But if we're pronouncing omicron as o, then ho sounds different from ha.
And those are my thoughts exactly. If you pronounce omicron like ah, then you can't tell the difference. If you just hear someone pronouncing a Greek word, you can't tell the difference between an alpha and an omicron.
Mm-hmm. And this pops up a bunch of times, so it's not just the relative pronoun.
Right. The relative pronoun is just one of many examples. And you know, Catherine, here's another angle from which to look at this. In today's field of teaching ancient Greek, and we see this in Latin, we see it in ancient Greek, there's a movement toward the importance of the spoken language.
Right.
A lot of teachers out there are using spoken language methods to teach, what we might call active methods, where you actually speak the language. So with this movement toward the spoken language, I think it's important to, and different people have different philosophies on this, but I think it's really important when you hear someone pronounce Greek to be able to distinguish what the spellings are.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Because of the spoken language turn that people are going back to teaching ancient Greek with more speaking, it can become so much more confusing if our pronunciation is not clear.
Of course, this brings up another issue. Some people who teach New Testament Greek, they use what they call a Koine pronunciation, in which other certain vowels sound the same. That's due to a phenomenon known as iotacism.
Right.
But anyway, the way we're teaching it in this book is kind of a very standard, tried and true way to pronounce Greek that is beneficial for students because it distinguishes the sound of each letter. And it allows people to hear the spellings of words. And they can put the sounds with the pictures. You know, the way the word looks is going to be consistently representative of the way it sounds. And likewise, when you hear something pronounced, you'll be able to discern the spelling of it. So that's really why I teach things in this book the way I do, is so that people can, and I say this in the book a couple of times, I say that so you can start to develop a mental sense of the relationship between the way Greek looks when it's written and the way it sounds.
Exactly.
It's just like in music. You know, when you're a student of music, you want to be able to look at written music on a staff and just hear in your head how it sounds. Sometimes you hear that referred to as sight singing. And then, on the other hand, if you hear someone play something, you want to be able to picture in your mind how you would write that. So there's also that same exact relationship in music, the ability to go from written music to the sounds, and then from the sounds back to the written music. As a budding musician, you need to be able to understand the relationship between the way music looks when it's written on the page and the way it sounds when someone plays it. And so that's kind of the same thing that I'm talking about with Greek. You need to be able to get the feeling for the relationship between how it looks and how it sounds. And I think that's hugely beneficial for students.
Absolutely.
So in our opinion, for the aforementioned reasons, it's a good idea to pronounce Omicron and Alpha as two different sounds. So that you can distinguish between the two and distinguish between the spellings of various words.